Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Stephen King podcast. A lot of things has happened since the last time, and since the last episode was a Salem Slot special, this one comes in a little closer to the one before than they usually do. And today we are going to give you lots of news.
That we are.
I think this is the most news we'll have for podcast so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are going to review the latest Stephen King book, Mr. Mercedes. But first, the news.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room. Okay, so here we go. First item up is Mr. King and the Simpsons. And if you go to Hans' site, you can see that Hans put up a post back in the middle of May, actually, about there's a new Stephen King Simpsons figurines. There's some good stuff there. There's lots of great clips from the various King appearances, the Green Mile, King's Bookstore, Rock Bottom Reminders.
Yeah.
And Hans was wondering, because King and Matt Groening both played in the band Rock Bottom Reminders.
Yeah.
You've got a few clips there, but you're just wondering if there's any more that you have missed. So, listeners, go check out Hans' webpage, May 15th entry. He's got a handful of clips there. Are there any more?
Yeah, I bet there are some small reference to King all over Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing is those figurines, since they are not figurines based on the real person. They are based on how the person looks in the Simpson episode.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. Those has been delayed now until September, I think. So they're going to be a bit late, but I think they are pretty cool. They are releasing them in batches, 5 batches, I think, with each have like 5 characters in them. So should be cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Next item is Ghost Brothers of Darkland County is back. They are doing a tour in the US, North American, starting November 8th and going all the way to December 5. They are visiting a lot of places in between those dates. I don't know if there's anyone close to you.
If I used to live on Ontario, they were doing one in Toronto on Remembrance Day, which would have been awesome because Massey Hall is a great venue for that. But unfortunately, I'm pretty well out on the West Coast now, and there's not any other Canadian dates. Probably the closest one to me besides that would be either St. Louis or Missouri or Chicago. So I don't know if I'm going to make it to one of those dates. I'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, I won't for sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as many as possible of you out there are going to go and see it.
Mm-hmm.
You never know how long this will run, but so far it's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah,
so,
quite a quiet period between the last tour and this one, so maybe it was just a matter of matching up dates and auditioning people for the shows. I imagine they're using different people. I don't know if it's going to be a traveling show. It's good to see that it's still going. It's been a slow burn.
A lot better than Carrie did.
Yes.
On Broadway. So.
Okay, so we've talked TV and the stage, and now we're going to comic books. And here we have the cover for the second issue of the Eddie Dean focused comic books. Prisoner number 2 has been revealed, and it's a pretty cool picture. I assume it's Eddie and his older brother, and it looks like above them it's one of those bird people or men in low yellow hats and coats. It's hard to tell because it looks like it's a pop machine or a popcorn machine or something. I'm not quite sure, but or maybe no, it's a car window from a truck. There it is. Okay, yeah. So it must be the men in the low coats, right?
Yeah. Looks like little bit like a big rat with a fisher hat and and fangs.
Yeah. There was a name for those characters in the, because that's in the showdown with Jake and Father Callahan, right? In that diner, but I can't remember the name of them. They're kind of like bird creatures that look like people. So it's a cool image.
But I'm a bit surprised that they took up this. I thought they had done everything they should with the Dark Tower and when they ended the comic. But I guess, it's still selling. But I thought it had its peak and were on its way down when they ended it. So
yeah,
maybe it's easier to sell a comic based on a book that people can refer to and remember as they read the book than all new material. I don't know. And one thing we learned from other comics is that the cover doesn't really have to have anything to do with what happens in the comic itself.
Very true.
This could just be a very cool illustration that fits the mood of the story, but this actually doesn't have to be a frame from the actual comic. So, but I guess we're going to check that out when it comes.
Yep.
Okay, next up is something interesting. I actually found an interview online, or actually it was more like an article with a few comments by King, and he actually made 3 very interesting comments. The first one was on the Dark Tower movie, and he said was very excited when Ron Howard got involved with the project. His original take on it was the best. He wanted to do movies, 3 tentpole movies, intercepted with a number of TV series that cover Roland and his adventures as a young man. It was a brilliant concept, and I'm pretty sure it would have worked. But what sometimes happens in Hollywood is that the financing fell apart, or the studios started to have second thoughts. And that's pretty much what happened with the Dark Tower.
Yeah, that's what happened with every time they've tried to do it. So it's the financing part and the studio having second thoughts is nothing new. But it's just nice to hear that King was behind Ron Howard's vision of how to bring it to the screen.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that would have been one of the best ways to do it, movies and TV series.
When we talk about it, I think we're pretty well on stream with it. But I've talked with other friends who are really into movies and that, and they just don't see how this could fly economically. And I guess that's what the studio finally decided too. But I'd love to see a venture of this type where you have a movie connected with a TV series.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I think it's something new and it's something different. And it would give us one of the biggest complaints people have about stories is that when you condense a big series of novels into movies, like the Harry Potter series or Lord of the Rings, you lose so much of the stuff. This one wouldn't obviously be able to cover everything still, but you would get a lot more into it if you could do the big stuff in the movies and have the character moments in the TV series. And I think that would be cool. But
yeah, I think the 2 biggest problem with it would be that number 1 is getting actors to sign up for such a big workload. I mean, it would take many years to do this.
Yes.
But on the upside of that, my wish that they should use unknown characters would maybe be a better choice, because they might not have as big problems as those big Hollywood names to commit to such a long time.
Right.
And the second problem that would be, for me at least that's non-American, is that for like TV series, some of them won't come here until years after they aired in the US. Right. So the format of one movie and then a TV series and one movie and TV series would probably not work for the audience outside the US, because if it wasn't released like on Netflix or something like that, just throw up the entire season. But I think that it would be a problem to get the same flow outside of the US as inside.
Yeah, I have a belief that if this does ever come to fruition, that it would take like maybe a partnership with a movie studio and a streaming service like Netflix to carry the costs. Of Netflix could handle the TV cost, and the studios could look after the movie costs, and then that way it's a partnership, and they split the risk.
Yeah.
If a Netflix or a Hulu or partner up on something like this, that would be awesome.
And I think that could work to get TV series out faster as well, compared to if they should go on regular TV channels in different countries.
Yeah, so that would be probably right now the optimal way to do it.
Yep.
But whether it's a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or something like that, we'll have to see.
Yep.
Let's keep our fingers crossed because studios are looking for content everywhere right now. So yeah, we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed on that.
My biggest fear with this is that they are just going to commit to one movie, and then it might not sell as good as they want to, and then they just drop it, and we get stuck with one movie that doesn't really do anything. So, well, I guess we will see.
Ongoing trials and tribulations of getting the Dark Tower to the silver screen.
Yeah, the next quote is about the movie version of Cell, who is apparently done, at least in filming. King comments on it with this: "The movie is not totally close to the original screenplay that I wrote, but I'll tell you what, the end of it is so goddamn dark and scary. It really kind of benchmark there." So that sounds both good and bad, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think it was pretty obviously reading that book that some changes would have to be made to adapt it to the screen. Geez, I don't know. Is it another dark ending?
Yeah, we know who loves that.
Yeah, because we know that Hans likes those kind of endings.
Yes.
So it's going to be interesting to see this because The Walking Dead has been so successful and there's so many zombie-flavored things out there right now that I'm very curious to see how this is going to try to put a different spin on it.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond just using the cell phone as the agent of creating zombies.
Yeah.
But
and I think
we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think I tried to remember one zombie movie that actually ended positive, and I couldn't come up with a single one. So it's interesting to see. I mean, they all end with disaster and death.
World War Z was hopeful.
Yeah, kind of. But they never really...
Like it was their promise of humanity coming back, at least in that ending.
Yeah, but all it takes is one zombie and it's goodbye world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and the last quote is actually about the next book, Revival, and that sounds also very promising. King says, "It's too scary. I don't even want to think about that book anymore. It's a nasty, dark piece of work. That's all I can tell you." Sounds like a great book to me.
Yeah, it's got my mouth watering.
Yep. I don't know.
Even though it's got a lame cover, but
did you read the excerpt from it that was in?
No, I want to go on cold. I don't want to read it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I read it.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Good.
But reading it, I would never have guessed that it was a nasty, dark piece of work.
Oh, okay.
Because this is more like get to know a few characters and so, but it really wasn't. It didn't give away that it was that kind of book. So
that's good.
But that made it even scarier because then my mind got going on what was going to happen to make this what seemed like a quite pleasant event go really nasty. So I think that could be a really great book.
Well, that sounds like a great teaser then.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Well, then I will read it because out of the two books, and I obviously can't make a final decision until I read this one, but this book had me more excited when we were first heard about him back when, as opposed to Mr. Mercedes, which is more of a crime drama. So this sounds like much more my jam kind of story. So I'm really looking forward to this. Do you know how many pages it is?
I think I've heard somewhere around 500 or something like that.
All right.
I'm not sure if there's actually a definite page count yet on it.
Okay.
But this excerpt was 16 pages long, so it was quite long.
Okay. So character building stuff.
Yeah. So you have to buy the paperback, and it has to be the US paperback of Dr. Sleep, because if you buy the UK, you get excerpt from Mr. Mercedes.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Well, you guys got that story, right? That bad kid story. So
yep.
So that'll make the people that are upset about the non-translation of that story a little bit happy, I guess.
Yep.
All right. So turn until the silver screen. First item up we've got, and the Stephen King movie cottage industry continues to chug along. We've got a story from May 18th on Hans' site that it was reported at Cannes that Oculus Helmer, Mike Flanagan, and I saw that movie and I quite liked it, will be adapting Gerald's Game to the silver screen. And he has written the script with his writing partner, Jeff Howard, and this will be produced under the Intrepid Pictures banner. So the producer from that is Trevor Macy, and he also worked with Flanagan on his other two horror films. So yeah, Gerald's Game, that's like a one-room movie. So again, it shouldn't be too expensive to do. Of course,
it could be great. I mean, look at Misery. It was also mostly a one-room story, and that turned out to be a great movie. So
yeah, if they can capture that tension and vibe That would be pretty cool. Like you said, it's got that misery rear window scenario to it. So I'm hopeful because this director, I thought he did a bang-up job with Oculus, which was dealing with a mirror where if you looked into it, you basically lost yourself and would go back and forth through time and all this kind of stuff. And he really set up some cool visuals with that. And he has a grasp of how to create tension without necessarily gore. So it sounds like he's the right kind of writer-director for this kind of project.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I read somewhere, it might have been like 10, 15 years ago, that at the time King was interested in actually directing this movie. So it's been in the talks for a long time. But I know he thought there was some problems with the story that mainly concerned the half-naked lady on the bed. So we have to see how the censorship take on that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she'll have a T-shirt on or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was wise that King didn't do it, because to do a movie with some characters walking around and talking is hard enough, but to do like a scene where persons be in one room, let's say 75% of the movie, as a director, it's very tough to come up with different ways to make that visually interesting. And I think you need a couple of other projects under your belt before you would even attempt something like that. So
yeah, we shall see. And next up is Under the Dome. There's been a lot of news about that one because the premiere is June 30. So it's just, well, I guess when this podcast is out, it will be about around that time. So, but there has been a lot of trailers released. There were one clip where King actually read from the script. A couple of, I don't know how long he read, but it was a little bit. And there's been other actors from the series who has also read from the script. And tomorrow, since we are recording this on June 22nd, there's going to be a 1-hour special Under the Dome that will concentrate on what happened in season 1 and how we will proceed into season 2. I guess you have all seen this when you hear this anyway. So what I think was the most interesting news is that Brian Vaughan, is that how you pronounce his name? Vaughan, thank you. Has stepped down as executive producer writer from Under the Dome. And this actually happened in the quiet. Because when I found this online, it was in a news report that said, like, how come nobody reported that he did this a couple of months ago? So I don't know really what the story was about that. But he has left it, and if I remember correctly, he was one of the 2 directors who was most critical to season 1 after it had finished. So we'll see what happened with that, if there are a lot of changes, or if it will continue as it has, or if maybe King will get a bigger part in creating. He has written the first episode, so at least that one will be interesting because of that. And it has already been, I don't know if this is a spoiler, if you don't want to know anything, please keep your ears closed for 30 seconds. It's already been revealed that 2 of the main characters will die in the first episode. So it's pretty obvious to me that they are, even if they probably won't admit it, but I think they felt they had to amp things up a little bit for the second season.
Well, not only that, they'd have to give this series some legs. The show is going on much longer now than the book did, so they have to add some new layers to this onion skin story that they're working on. Yeah,
but it's pretty uncommon that they go out in advance and say that 2 of our main characters will die in the next episode. That usually comes as a shocker or a surprise to the audience.
Yeah.
Here they are admitting to it even before it happens. So that tells me at least that they are, I don't know, they are fishing for more audience. I don't know. I don't really know why they would go out and say that.
Well, I think they just want to pique curiosity. Maybe they were feeling a little bit of a sting from the criticisms that the series was getting. So they want to make sure that the people that were waffling, maybe forgetting about what was going on, keep their interest up. And hopefully in this first episode, they're going to show us what this new direction is and tighten things up from a logic and story coherency telling point of view. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Not really believing some of the characters are doing is one of the issues, but they really need to establish a timeline and say, like, this is day 1, this is day 2, because to us, it feels like 4 months. In the series, it's only supposed to have been about a week, but they're not establishing that. So when these new characters are showing up, it's, well, where the heck were they all this time? It's that's a little hard to buy, that new people are still mysteriously showing up.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems, actually, that people are showing up now at first.
Because they should have been there in the first season. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the natural thing if you get a dome over your town is to not to hide in a cabin in the woods for like 2 weeks.
That's right.
You go to town and see what everybody else is doing. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
By the time this episode is out, it will be very close to the season premiere of the second season premiere.
Right.
And I guess we'll know more by then.
Mm-hmm. Next item up for movie adaptation is It. And it's been reported that it is moving from Warner's to New Line, but that's a little misleading because New Line is actually a subsidiary of Warner's, and New Line is more focused on horror. So there's just been more like a restructuring over at Warner Brothers, but that's really the only change. As far as we know, everything else is still in place. Kerry Fukunaga, I hope I got that right. Sorry about that if I didn't. Is still on tap to direct the 2 films, and everybody, as we should know, as we discussed and mentioned previously, he was the one that just directed the recent HBO True Detective series. So again, seems like they've tapped a good fit for the It project. So I'm hoping that will happen, and it's going to be 2 movies.
It will be very interesting to see how they divide the story.
Mm-hmm.
If they do one movie about the kids and one about the adults, or how they slice the story, because each movie will have to, at least the first one will have to stand pretty much by itself.
Yeah.
And then I guess they would want people who haven't seen the first to see the second as well. So, but then they might be more demanding that you have actually seen the first before you see the second. But it would be interesting to see how they slice the story.
Yeah, and from what we're seeing in the article, it looks like the first movie is about the kids and the second one's about the adults. It's going to be interesting to see how they actually tackle the creature that is It. Like, I think the one part of that story that hasn't aged very well is the fact that It is a spoiler, if you haven't read the story yet, is a spider. So I really think if anything should be changed, it should be that. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you think that spider thing still works for you, or?
I think it very much depends on how they do it. I didn't like the ending of the first version of it.
Right.
But I guess my biggest problem isn't probably what it is. It's more like how they do it.
Right.
So I think they could keep it if they could do it in a good way, but I wouldn't be too upset if they change it to something else, just as long as it's not like a guinea pig or a cute animal.
Like the rabbit from Monty Python and the Holy Grail or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, like that whole spider thing. I know that there's tie-ins to the Dark Tower and that too with that, but that's a tough sell. I don't know how to address that, because to me it's the weakest part of the story. It might almost be better, although that's a problem today. People expect to see what the monster is, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they can make it more like an alien type of creature or something like from Alien movies or something like that. I don't know. Hard to say.
Maybe they shouldn't show it at all.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Keep it secret what it is, or I don't know.
Be very interesting to see how they tackle that, for sure.
Yeah, and the next one is also something we report on very often, is The Stand. And this time it's the director or screenwriter, Josh Bone, who's comment on it. And he says that they are going to do a 3-hour R-rated version with an amazing A-list cast. So, and biggest reaction this one got was that there's no way they can do it in 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I got thinking of was also that he says that they have an amazing A-list cast. And that sounds like they have actually started casting it yet. And that's quite interesting, because that means that they are actually moving forward. So that would be cool.
Well, I think what he's saying there is this is what we plan to do. I don't think he's gotten that far yet. So we'll have to see. 3 hours for this story. Man. I don't know how they're going to pull it off. They're going to have to really collapse a lot of characters into other characters and pare the story down.
Or they leave section of it out, entire characters and their story.
Yeah.
They leave it all out and just doing a slim version of it.
Yeah, because if you just start going through your head, counting off what you think are the essential moments of that story, it quickly becomes 10 or 15. So
yeah.
How are they going to cover all this in 3 hours? I have no idea.
No. One idea is, and probably the Stephen King fans will have a problem with this, but maybe if he put away some of the characters and their stories and did a slim version of it and told that one very, very good, maybe that would make a tighter movie, Because if you're doing like a TV series where you introduce all these characters, there are going to be a lot of introducing new characters.
Yeah.
And the risk of that is that it's getting a bit too long and maybe a bit slow for a movie.
Yeah.
And even though I think that the King fans are going to react that they are missing some characters from the book, but maybe the moviegoer that hasn't read the book or hasn't read it recently maybe won't care. Maybe for them it's better to have a movie that's tighter and more like something happen all the time.
I understand what you're saying. You want to ramp it up and have it move at a quicker
Yeah.
pace. Problem for us King fans is that, and the director says it here, which is at odds with what he's saying that we're going to do it in 3 hours, is I don't read screenplays. It's always just establish the character. And there's one thing that we've learned, establishing characters takes time. So like, how are you, unless you're only having like 2 characters in this movie, you're limited to how well you can establish your characters. So to me, it's a mixed message that he's sending across here, and the strength of Stephen King books, and we're going to come across it when we talk about Mr. Mercedes, and we just did it with the Salem's Lot podcast, is his strength is characters. So you have to take the time to establish characters, and if you're going to do a 3-hour movie, then you're basically going to only be able to establish 3 or 4 characters, and 3 or 4 characters is not what The Stand is about. So it might carry the skeleton of the story, but it's not going to be The Stand, and that's fine. But for me, I want to see a story based on The Stand. And this will be with the characters. And if this is just going to be a pared down version, so be it. And that's for a different audience. I'll just have to be satisfied with the miniseries, which is one of the better adaptations, even if it's a bit dated too. So
yeah, it's definitely going to take some heat from King fans if it leaves too much out.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe The Stand can't be done as a movie. Maybe it has to be done as a miniseries or like 12 episode series to be done truly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll have to see. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
3-hour version of The Stand is going to be more like a sit down.
Yep. And next
is A Good Marriage. Happily has found a distributor, and Screen Media Films has acquired the North American rights to it, and it's going to be out in October, which is good news because that's ramping up into the Oscar part of the calendar where studios usually release their big movies in the last 3 months of the year so that they don't get forgotten during the Oscar nomination process. Now, this might just be a coincidence. I guess what worries me a little bit is we know that they had an advanced screening because they had a contest for it that we reported on a couple of months ago. And I've searched the internet, but I've heard zero about that screening. Yeah, so you think if it was good, there would have been some word of mouth slipping out about it, but it's everybody's been quiet, so that has me worried a little bit. But I am glad that it's getting a release in October, but I don't know how wide it's going to be, and what you probably have to keep your eye out for because it's probably going to be in and out of theaters fairly quickly, but we'll have to see. Yeah,
maybe they had to sign some papers not revealing anything of it. I don't know how those screenings works, if you're allowed to talk about it or
non-disclosure.
I don't know how that works since it's not out. If they want to change something, maybe they don't want that any word of it out. If they change it and it doesn't mix, it doesn't work with what they are releasing when they're releasing it. So but I love this story, so I hope so very much that this will be a good movie.
Yeah, I can understand if they signed non-disclosure agreements, but somebody could have just said saw A Good Marriage and it was good or something like that without just saying that they liked it, but it's been nothing, which is worrying. But I mean, if this distributor wanted to pick it up for distribution, then that's awesome. And the fact that they're releasing it in October, that's a good time of year to release a movie to get noticed for Academy Award nominations, if that's even in the realm of possibility. But with this cast, Joan Allen and that, you got to think that it's going to be, if nothing else, a solid movie.
Yeah. And in the next news, we are going back to Haven. It's been a while since we were there, and now it's reported that Laura Mennell, who played Nina on Sci-Fi's Alpha, who I haven't seen, but you have?
Yes, for 2 seasons before it got canceled, and she had a character, was a show about people with powers, like the X-Men, much more grounded, and she had the ability to mind control people and make them do things against their own will. So that was pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah, she's been cast as a recurring role of a skin doctor. And what's also interesting is that they are finding a genetic marker in the troubled people,
Mm-hmm.
who would indicate maybe that this is something who's inherited, or it might not be Audrey in a previous life who has given this to the troubled people, as was indicated in the last season with her and the fellow who they pushed down the hole, who I can't remember the name of.
Right. Yeah, the guy from Eureka.
Yep.
That guy.
Yep, that guy.
That guy.
Exactly. Yep. So this is maybe a twist in the storyline then, because they didn't really get to any conclusion if it was Audrey and this other sci-fi guy who had given them the troubles. It was indicated, and we were made to believe that it was the case, but it was never proven, as far as I remember, at least.
Yeah, I know this storyline about genetic markers and troubled people. This sets up a red flag for me. This is like George Lucas making the Force, linking it to midi-chlorians, and a lot of people didn't like that.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how this plays out, but I don't like this linking it to a genetic marker. That's just sounds hokey to me. It should just be a supernatural force. I don't like them to tie it down to something like this. And your idea that it might not be Audrey and them that brought the troubles there.
Yeah.
If we're going to find out in this season that was a whole shell game by a character who we can't remember, that would not make me happy either, to find out that all of last season was a big hoax.
Yeah, and we were hoping that in season 5 everyone would jump in the hole and come up in this alternate universe, and I guess that's out the window now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting if they jumped down the hole and came out in a door that led into Roland's world. And then sci-fi could hijack the Dark Tower story and evolve this into that.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Or maybe not.
We're ambivalent with the ending to last season, though I think in general a lot of people seem to really enjoy last season.
Yeah.
And the ratings were pretty good too, so we'll just have to see how this plays out. But it sounds like they're going to resolve whatever threads were left over from season 4 pretty quickly if they're going to start moving on to this storyline about a deadly viral outbreak.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the viral outbreak is Captain Trips. We'll have to see.
Yeah, could be. And this isn't the first time we have been thinking that they can't possibly move on from where they ended in one season when they begin the next. So they have a tendency to be able to do that. So hopefully they can do it this time as well.
Okay, so now we're finally getting back to what brought us all to Stephen King in the first place, books.
Yes.
And of course, we have had Mr. Mercedes out for a couple of weeks now. It was June 3rd. We're already June 22nd. And for a while there, it was number 1. So it debuted strong sales. And while the book was being released and everybody was getting a book, Hans had put up a post about people sending in photos for showing their picture of their copy of Mr. Mercedes. And your goal was to get to 200. And how did you make out with that, Hans?
Well, to date, we are actually over 200.
Awesome.
Yeah, 211. So that was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Everyone posing. And I'm hoping that more photos will come in as the book is released. In fact, it hasn't only been released in like the US and the UK, the Netherlands, and Poland, I think.
Okay.
So it will be released in lots of other different countries. And hopefully those people will send in photo of their books and themselves as well. And both you and I are there as well.
Yes.
Just scroll down a bit.
Yeah.
Check that site out and send in your photos. Maybe...
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Maybe we could get a couple of hundreds more.
In case people are wondering who that chap beside me is, that's that art book that we've been talking about. So that's actually one of the sides of the slip tray that the books fits into. So that shows you the size of that art book. So compared to a regular book.
It's not your neighbor checking in on you.
No. No. Oh, it looks like it, doesn't it?
What are you doing? What's this noise? Yeah, the next, and this is really interesting, I think. King revealed just a couple of days after Mr. Mercedes was out, that is actually the first book in a trilogy. Oh man. My tongue keeps slipping this time.
Yeah, take a drink of water.
And the next book will be out in the spring of next year already. So that will happen fast, and it's called Finders Keepers. And the third book, who hasn't gotten a title yet, will be out in 2016. So, and it's interesting because, as you mentioned a little bit in the beginning or in other news, was that this isn't horror movie, maybe not a typical King movie. Book. So it's interesting that he's choosing to do a trilogy of this one. So, but it should be interesting to check it out. And King posted on the official site a list of everyone who was in the massacre that starts the book, and listed who lived, who died, who were injured, because they will play a part in the upcoming books. So you should check that out and maybe print it out and have it with you when you read the other books, because I think those names will come back for the other books.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, this is interesting, and apparently he's already got the second book written, which he must, because it's already on the schedule for next year. So he's probably working on the third book as we speak. And fans were a little outraged when he tweeted this so soon after the release of the book, because people thought it was a spoiler. And he had a follow-up tweet saying that no, it's not a spoiler, but I can't say any more because then it will become a spoiler. So, but now that I've finished the book, looking at this tweet, it is a spoiler if you haven't read the first book, because these characters all survive, right? Like, but when you're reading that, you don't know that if they're going to make it, especially Jerome and Holly. Yeah. So it was a spoiler. So I'm not really sure what he's saying, unless he's talking. It can't be a prequel. That's not possible, because Holly was not even in the picture, because King didn't even know her at that point. So there's no way they could have met until this book, right? So, or
maybe they could, but I think
But how?
Yeah, I don't know. But I think what he meant was that the fact that he mentioned those names wasn't necessarily an indication that they would live in Mr. Mercedes or die. Because maybe the other books take place maybe before the ending of the first book, at least. So maybe the fact that they are in book 2 maybe not doesn't
then he should
have an effect on the ending of the third.
Then he should have put in some of the characters that did die, just to because like Hartsfield is still alive at the end of this book. He wakes up, so that's interesting too. So I don't know. I
can see that people get annoyed about it.
Like you could say that with flashbacks and that you could have any of these characters, even if they had died. If one of these characters had died, you could say, well, there's going to be a flashback. And that's why it's not a spoiler. I guess that's the way around it. He just should have said that it's just the first novel in a trilogy. And some of the characters will return instead of giving the names out. But I don't know. I'm sure somebody can explain it to us, but for me, it is. If I hadn't read the book, it was a spoiler. So I got the book after this tweet came out, so I knew that. I just said, well, these characters aren't going to die. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could return to this tweet of his when we have read the second and third book, and maybe we'll understand what he meant by that.
Maybe, but yeah. That's interesting. You know, he hasn't done a trilogy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We'll get into more of a thorough review of Mr. Mercedes after we're finished with the news. And we got one final item. This is about a new short story collection for the fall of 2015, perhaps, Hans?
And we don't really know much more about it. It hasn't been revealed what stories will be in it, if there will be only stories that has been published in different papers or stuff, or if there will be like new stories in it, or we really don't know anything. What we know is that it's planned for the fall of 2015. But that's pretty much all we know.
Okay. So then we know that, again, for the third year in a row, he's going to have 2 books out.
Yeah.
At the minimum.
That's amazing. I mean, we're getting very spoiled.
We are. And I guess the big question now is, what's his next book going to be about outside of the Mercedes trilogy?
Yeah.
He hasn't talked about that at all.
No. That and which stories will be included in the collection, because there are a lot of stories that could be collected.
Yeah. Batman and Robin have an altercation.
Yeah. I think the one that people will be most disappointed if it won't include is Bad Kid.
Wow, we have to wait till 2015 to read that story?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe he could release it earlier, but if it hasn't been released by then, and it's not included in this one, I think a lot of people will be disappointed.
Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe it would be included with Revival. That would be a nice bonus.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Boy, to leave it till 2015? Well, I guess he could.
Yeah.
By then, most of us will have forgotten about it, but yeah, we'll have to see. That'll be interesting. We should start a pool on that. Will it come out before that, or will we have to wait till 2015 to read The Bad Kid in English?
Yeah. Or will it be excluded from the collection and not even released by then?
I don't think they'd do that. I could see it. No. That's why I'm thinking that it would be awesome if it was in Revival, but as an addition. Yeah. Because would he put in an excerpt for the next Mr. Mercedes novel in the revival?
Well, I don't think King has that much to do with that, actually. I think it's more like the publishers who decide to put an excerpt just to sell the book. And maybe they, I mean, of course King has to agree to it and has to say yes to it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that he went to the publisher and said, oh, please include this excerpt from Revival. I think the publisher came to him and say, oh, we want to...
Oh, yeah, no doubt. But I'm sure he has final say over whether or not they could have done that.
Yeah, I think...
Like with a different, like a writer just starting out, they don't have any or nearly the clout to say, no, I don't want you to do that, or yes, I do. But I'm sure he has final approval over that stuff at this stage of his career.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe, and this is purely me speculating, I'm thinking that maybe it was some kind of mistake that Revival ended up in Dr. Sleep. Because in the UK edition, we get Mr. Mercedes. And it would have made more sense to promote Mr. Mercedes, who was just released like a week before, than a book that will be released like in 5 months.
Right.
And on the back of the paperback, it says, I don't exactly remember, but it doesn't mention the title. It just says, includes an excerpt from King's new book or latest book or something like that. That if you just read it, it would be more make more sense if it was for Mr. Mercedes.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I don't know if maybe it's me who is speculating too much, but it's strange that it's different between the UK and US editions. I think they would, since they released the book on the same date, they would also promote Revival as well. And it's a bit strange as well to release an excerpt like 5 months, because I'm speculating that they are doing this to both selling more copies of Dr. Sleep in paperback and also as promotion. And I think it's a bit early to promote a book 5 months ahead.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't. It was just something that I thought about when I saw this whole thing.
It is interesting why in the UK they're going with the Mr. Mercedes excerpt versus here.
And it just hit me actually that it might make sense, since I think the UK paperback was out a bit earlier than the US. That made more sense if that one was out like the same day or a couple of days before Mr. Mercedes was actually released.
Okay.
So that might be some of the reasons. It was a fun surprise though that it was actually Revival who was in there. So.
Cool. So that is the news.
Yes.
And now we're going to talk about Mr. Mercedes.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around and pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
Alrighty, so we're here. It's been 3 weeks since King released his latest book, which we now know is the first book in a trilogy. And that book, of course, is Mr. Mercedes. And it's King's first out-and-out straight crime mystery novel, if you don't count The Colorado Kid, which was kind of a mystery story, but it wasn't really a crime novel as much as just a story about some mysteries never get solved. But in this one, Mr. Mercedes, it does. And I'm interested to hear what you think of it, Hans.
Well, I think that it's an interesting twist, because as I see it, either you can keep the identity of the killer a secret and have the reader try and figure it out during the book.
Yeah.
Or you can, as in this case, reveal it pretty soon in the book, and you can let the other characters not know, but the readers to know.
Yeah.
And personally, I actually like this version more, where you as the reader knows what a horrible person this is and what he or she is capable of. And as he moves around in the realm of where you are in the book, and the people he interacts with has no idea of who he is, what he's done, what he's about to do, and they just think that he's a nice person who helps them, and so that makes the villain so much more scary, I think.
Yeah, you really get to in his head, and you get to know him as a person as well, which is as we've mentioned so many times, is King's main strength is characters. And I agree with you. This is the Columbo approach, that we know who the bad guy is, and it's the difference here is though that the hero of the book doesn't know who the bad guy is, and you can create that tension of having the bad guy really living in the edges of the hero's life without them knowing it. So right from the beginning, the ice cream truck is driving by his house almost every day. So he's there right in plain view. That tension is really cool. That was an interesting aspect of it. We keep talking about how great King is with characters, and what really just amazes me still is in this book, the first chapter really deals with the victims of Mr. Mercedes' first crime. And just within that first chapter, you get to know like 2 characters really well and a couple others not so much. But it's just amazing how quickly he builds up a character, don't you think?
Absolutely. As we have said in almost every time we talk about King, that is really his strength, that he can build a character and he can make you care about it. And he can do that even with someone who's bad.
Yeah.
And then you care about them, but you don't like them. You dislike them and you think they are really horrible people, but you really feel that they are horrible people. So, and also as you say, in the first chapter, I think is maybe the strongest chapter in the entire book, where he builds this up and then he just lets Mr. Mercedes more than just run them over and they are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also interesting because that is what you least expect, because when he builds a character that you like and that you care about, even if you know that he can, you often don't think that he will kill them. Some way, somehow they miraculously will survive or jump away or something like that. But that doesn't happen here. And I think that first chapter, when from the book starts to the massacre, it's amazing. It's a great chapter.
Yes. It's you really feel for that mother and her baby. And the thing is too, like even like with Hartsfield, who's an evil character, but they're evil. Like you said, you can sympathize or empathize. I guess you can't sympathize, but you can empathize with the way that they were brought up and things like that. And how you're reading about this single mother, and you're thinking to yourself, I would be like the other people in the lines looking at her like, are you serious? Are you crazy to bring a child to something like this in the middle of the night? But he gets you inside her head and get to understand why she's forced to do that. And you just would hope in your real life that you would have that kind of insight and sympathy or empathy for other people. And so it's humbling when you read that stuff, because like if you're just walking by somebody in the street and you see like a homeless person or something like that, you're pretty dismissive about them. So I found that a very humbling section of the book to read. What's really interesting about this book is all the characters are flawed in a certain way. Hodges, the retired detective, is carrying some big flaws about what he's doing with his life after being retired, as well as how the guilt he has about finding out that him and his partner really didn't handle the investigation about the lady's car properly. Hartsfield, of course, he's a mess, but his mother doesn't help the situation at all.
No.
And the woman who's killed in here, Janie?
Yeah, Janie.
Yeah. She has a cousin, Holly, who's autistic, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Or has emotional difficulties. But they all have strengths as well. So that's what makes them such interesting characters, because they're not perfect people. You could find something to like and dislike about every one of them. I mean, even Jerome, who is probably the most stable character in the book, has that annoying habit of doing that step and fetch it kind of talk. That's very cliche. And I almost cheered when Holly told him to shut up, because it was immature.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. So
yeah, and I liked how Jerome, from time to time, for me at least, he got older than, I think he was 17, if I'm not wrong. And he acted like much older than his age. Yeah. Usually that is something that annoys me, when people are acting like it doesn't really fits their age. Right. But here it worked, because when he did, there was always something that brought him back down to his 17 again. Yeah. So I think it worked, because he wandered off, but he was brought back pretty quickly by King, and so that worked. Usually I get annoyed with, especially kids, when they are acting much older than they are. Right. And that's a problem for me. But here it worked. So I liked all the characters. Yep.
Even the annoying ones.
Yeah, exactly. And if there was some problems I had, it was maybe when Holly and Jerome were with Hodges, and I think it was when they broke into Hartsfield's house. Right. And there was some neighbor coming up to them, and they said they were the police, and he showed them his ID. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I can get that he thought that Hodges was a police, but Holly and Jerome, kid of 17 in the back seat of the car.
Mhm.
It felt a little bit strange that he would go for that, but I don't know. It didn't bother me really, but when I read it, I thought it didn't really worked. But
Kind
it
of
was no
stretched,
big
yeah.
problem.
It kind of
Yeah,
stretched
a bit stretched. Yeah.
credibility for sure.
Yeah.
There's elements of this story that remind me a lot of Cell, especially around the computer stuff.
Yeah.
And it's funny that, like, the main character, Hodges, is a retired detective, so he's pretty computer illiterate. And I got the feeling that King was more comfortable writing him than he was actually talking about the computer stuff, because it's all this old, and that's the trouble nowadays with technology and mysteries and that. It always comes back to this cliched password stuff, and I have to say that King did his darndest to not just make it too easy for the characters to find the password, but in the end he had to waffle, and that picture that Hodges found of the Hartfield and his mother, and they pulled a phrase from that, and that got him into the computer, and that was reminded me of Cell a little bit. And the other thing was too that the mother would actually write down those passwords that Hartsfield used to turn on the lights in his computers. I thought that was awfully convenient. And the funny thing is, reading that stuff, it sounded like a lot of mumbo-jumbo hokiness to me. And I thought to myself, if you replaced all this computer stuff with some sort of a supernatural force or something like that, the story wouldn't really change that much. So it's like he had these supernatural elements, and he just says, okay, everywhere there's supernatural, I'm just going to replace it with technology.
Yeah.
So that whole password stuff, that's one of the reasons I'm not a big mystery fan, because that stuff just doesn't happen in real life. And if it's a ghost, then I don't know why. I can buy it better that a ghost would move something so that somebody could see something that was important. But people have to make these leaps of logic that just don't happen in the real world.
No,
you don't find people's passwords out that easily. So
no, and I think that because a ghost doesn't exist, so you can actually do whatever.
Yeah.
Because you can't refer to that as something that wouldn't happen in real life, because it doesn't happen.
That's right.
But as you say, finding a password too easy makes it strange, because that doesn't happen in real life.
Yeah, but that's not just a King problem. That's this type of story problem that every writer has to face. So I was just kind of chuckling, though, that every time I saw something about computers, I said, if you put a ghost in here, it would work just as well. Or some supernatural force, like Janie's ghost could have helped them, right?
Yeah.
And that was the other part that reminded me of Cell, too, because we have like that girl in Cell gets hit in the head with a rock and dies, right? So here, Janie gets blown up in the car, and you knew that hat was going to come into play at some point too. So because it just seemed kind of weird to buy that hat, even if she thought he was sexy with it on. I just gone, okay. But I like those characters, so you still felt it when she blew up in the car, that's for sure. So which just shows King's ability to create characters. So I thought he did a really good job of making you think, well, there's just no way that they're going to get to this guy in time to stop him from blowing up everybody at the concert. I thought that was really well played out.
That was actually my main concern at the end of the book, that it was going to happen in some action movie type of version that really doesn't happen but happens anyway, where they managed to do the impossible just because, listen. But I think he solved that problem correctly, and that it worked.
I mean, who couldn't help but cheering when it was Holly was the one that hit him on the head with, what did he call that thing? Slap happy or something? It had some kind of a name, that sock that was filled with ball bearings. So.
Yeah.
That was a nice twist, that it was a sock of ball bearings that stopped a bomber from blowing ball bearings all over through the auditoriums.
Yeah. And I have to go back to the relationship between Hartsfeld and his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really, how can I say this so it doesn't sound the wrong way, but I really liked it, but in a bad way.
Right.
It was, of course, a very disturbed relationship, but I liked how King described it, and he made it believable, even though it was totally strange and totally weird. But somehow he made it so that you bought that it happened, and really made Hartsfield this twisted person who was evil, but somehow you understood a bit of why he was evil, and that he wasn't being evil just for being fun, because he actually had a lousy life himself, and so I think that relationship with the mother really established Hartsfield as a person, as a character, even though it was a really nasty relationship.
Yeah, it was, again, like you could empathize with the characters, right?
Yeah.
So even though it was a twisted relationship,
Yeah.
it wasn't, they weren't just cliches.
No.
A happy slapper, that's what it was called. The happy
Yep.
slapper, yeah. So the way he resolved that, giving the underdog the hero's moment, I really like that. And the fact that Jerome and Holly are the ones that get the commendation and Hodges basically is just lucky not to go to jail is it's nicely played. So I really like the book, and I know there's fans out there that have been waiting for King to write a straight-up crime novel, probably for a long time. The only thing that, for me, is because there's no supernatural elements to it, the book just feels a little lighter in content. I don't know how to put it exactly. It doesn't, it's more straightforward, I guess. It's more, because it's more grounded, there's less room for your imagination to play out the story because there's no supernatural elements here. And I just find that the supernatural elements in his normal work give the story more weight, emotional weight in my mind, because I'm just geared towards liking stuff about the supernatural and that. Yeah. So this is, to me, is like a light read, like compared to reading something like The Shining or The Dead Zone or something like that. Yeah. This one you like the characters and that, but it doesn't resonate with me as strongly as the other books. I don't know. Do you have the same thing, or?
I understand what you're saying, because it doesn't challenge you in the same way, because you know everything.
Yeah.
Most of the things, maybe not how everything is going to play out, but you know who the bad guy is, who the good guy is, pretty much figure out some of the events that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I can see that it's a lighter read because of that. But I don't have any problems with it not being a supernatural book.
No.
I think it's good that King alternates, and I think I like this one more than Dr. Sleep, actually.
Oh, interesting.
To compare with the prior book.
I never really thought about that. I guess the only reason because I think there was a little bit of disappointment with Dr. Sleep because there's never really a big confrontation between the main villain and the young girl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's just too powerful in that story. So, yeah, you're expecting the big confrontation that you don't get in that story, even though it's a good characters study. But yeah, I can understand that for sure. As I mentioned off the top of the podcast, it'll be very interesting to see how I feel after reading Revival, because that seems to be much more of a standard Stephen King thing. And I agree with you. It's good for him to change up pace like this. But in the end, I'll always like his horror stuff better. But that's just me. I'm not a crime mystery unless it's like old style stuff like Sherlock Holmes stuff.
Yeah.
And that's much more about the piecing together of the clues and that. This seems like an elongated episode of any cop show that you see on TV, Law and Order or CSI or whatever. So it doesn't stick with me. I don't think it'll stick with me as long as his other stories do.
I think it's a good story to be the first of 3 books, though.
Yes.
I think it will work good as 3 set of books. So and it will be interesting to see what the other 2 books are about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that we get one of them that will focus on the mother and kid that we mentioned earlier, that is Mr. Mercedes' victims in the massacre. I would love to hear more about those 2.
Right.
And also, the book ends with a little twist.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, that Hartsfield actually wakes up.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think he did that?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he'll be in one of the book, either book 2 or 3 again. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to see. First of all, I like that he woke up at the end of the book, because I think that was quite unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that maybe it would end with him dying or something like that, more than him waking up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. And then I think, I think King have to include him in one of the upcoming books about this as well. But I'm not sure I want to see him go on a revenge mission for Hodges.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see him do something else, like maybe waking up and having amnesia or something like that. And
well, it sounds like that because the nurse says he has a headache and he's asking for his mother. So it's, like those are his 2 big characteristics, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder, could it be set up that maybe one of the relatives of one of the victims kills him in the next book, and then Hodges has to go track this guy down or these people down that did this.
Yeah.
That's one possibility. We'll have to see. But it's very curious that he's revived
Yeah.
this character
Yeah. Yep.
at the end of this book. Be
Yeah.
interesting. I wonder if there would be any crossover to Revival. That would be
interesting.
interesting. I doubt it,
Yeah.
but it's just fun to think about it.
Yeah. Maybe it would be a little too much. 3 books and then Revival as well, or maybe it could be a small, I don't know.
Mention. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else that you want to say about Mr. Mercedes?
No, not really. Just that I think it's a great book. I actually think this will be in my top 5.
Oh, wow.
It's hard to say when you have just read the book, because I think right after you have read it you almost always likes the books.
Yeah.
But it has to settle in, and
Yeah.
I'm sure I am going to read it once again before the next book is out
Right.
in the series. It's hard to say, but as of now, it definitely feels like it will be one of my top 5 books.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to talk to you when the next one comes out, because I wouldn't put it in my top 5, and I wouldn't even put it in my top 10.
Oh.
Top 20 maybe, but there's too many of his horror books that I like way more. So no, I couldn't put it up that high yet. Maybe yours will lower over time, and maybe mine will my rating will raise. We'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm down on the book. It's just not. Crime drama is just not my jam, so it doesn't excite me as much as his horror stuff. But it's a very well written book, except for some of the computer stuff that I find hokey. But great characters, and not just great characters on the good side, but great characters on the bad side. So it makes it all work much better. So it seems much more. You experience it much more emotionally real than you do with typical crime drama novels, where the bad guy is just so messed up from the get-go that is basically just a robot going out to kill, and that's it.
Yeah, I think Heartsfield is one of King's stronger bad guys, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's tricky with top 5 and top 10 books. So close into when you have read it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it has to be at least a couple of years, and you might have read it a second time, or until you can really put it in top 5. But I think this one actually have a chance for it. At least top 10, definitely.
There you go. Oh, the one thing he did use the technology good for was Debbie's Blue Umbrella. The messages that Hodges would leave Hartsfield. Those were priceless. I was laughing my head off at some of the stuff he left for him. And then, of course, Hartsfield's reactions to it were just typical, but still very fun to read. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and when you talk about technology, I don't know if the gadget that he has to manipulate so he can unlock the cars.
Right.
I don't know if this is something that exists for real, or if it's something that King just made up. But when you read a book, it feels very much like something that could exist in real life, I think.
Yeah. He says in the afterword that such devices were only practical, like when in the first couple of years when remote keyless entry works. And he says now they're all scrambled and have chips in them. That kind of device doesn't work anymore.
Ah, okay. If King made it up, he did a great job in it, because he really believe in it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's our thoughts on Mr. Mercedes. And as usual, please send in your comments and thoughts either through the audio widget that's at Lilja's site, on Hans's site, or emails. We'll be glad to read them. I'm really curious to find out if you are a King fan and you like him because of his horror stuff. How does this book rate for you? And is it, like Hans says, is this going to be in your top 10? And if you are a crime drama reader outside of Stephen King, how do you feel his first stab at a crime novel stacks up against the other big crime writers out there? Send those comments and let us know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
So we haven't really decided what we're going to do yet next podcast, because we've just rolled two weekends in a row doing Salem's Lot and now this. So we're open for suggestions at this point, eh, Hans?
Yeah. We haven't anything decided yet, so...
Please, along with your comments on Salem's Lot and Mr. Mercedes, send in any thoughts you have about what you would like to see us podcast about next. If we get something good, can't promise, but we'll definitely look at it. We're always on the lookout for new ideas. And until then...
Stay scared.
But stay safe.
Oh, did I say that? Did I say that in the wrong way?
That's okay. We'll just keep our listeners on their toes, see if they even notice. All right?
Oh, man.
We can change. Stephen King can change things up. We can change up things too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so there you go. That's awesome.
This was a great episode to pick bloopers from, I think. Generic marker found in the trouble people. Okay, so they are actually thinking that this is something generic.
Genetic.
And that genetic. Okay. I'll do that over.
Yeah, why don't we start over? Just start right from the beginning on that piece.
Yeah, we do all.
Yeah.
Epidermologist.
Epidemiologist. Epidermal, right? Epidermal, like his skin.
Epidermal.
So, epidemiologist.
Oh man. I'm not gonna get
Just
to
say
do
skin doctor.
that. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So, we're going to start this all over again. This whole Haven article.